Hello, and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by Vincent McCory from The Voice of America in Washington.
Well, thanks. I'm Vincent McCory at The Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Joke Rogers in Lagos brings you that story.
The Rivers State government in South Nigeria and the Federal Ministry of Health have commissioned the 25.9 billion naira Cancer, Cardiovascular Disease Diagnostic and Treatment Center in Port Harcourt after 14 months of intensive engineering works. The medical facility is the first by any state government and one of the 3 functional in the country.
After 14 months of intensive works, the government-sponsored Cancer and Cardiovascular Diagnostic and Treatment Center in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, is set to be inaugurated by the Emir of Kano, Alhaji Aminu Ado Bayero. And that's the reason for this gathering, led by the host governor, Nyesom Wike, accompanied by his wife. The 3-story facility, which is named after former governor of the state, Dr. Peter Odili, is fitted with ICU and CCU patient accommodation ward, critical care areas for immune-compromised patients and private isolation bed wards, as well as a helipad for emergency patient drop-off, among others.
What we have here cannot be found in any part of this country, Nigeria, as I speak to you. The latest of the equipment, the most important equipment in the attack of 2 deadly problems of mankind, cancers and cardiovascular problems, will now be handled here.
An elated Dr. Odili and the special guest, the Emir of Kano, appreciate Governor Wike's commitment in project delivery in critical areas.
Revive the old friendship. Stand with him. If you stand with Governor Wike, you can walk without your aids, you can walk with your eyes closed. He's a man you can depend on.
It is not also out of place to appeal to the federal government of Nigeria to borrow a leaf from the governor of Rivers State and establish similar centers in each of the geopolitical zones so as to alleviate the suffering of those with cancer and cardiovascular related issues.
For Governor Wike, this is a mark of good governance and commitment to service, which he says is important in leadership.
When I was a minister, I did a lot of primary and secondary schools here. When I was a minister, I gave financial grants to Kenule Polytechnic and Ignatius Ajuri University. So, you cannot hold me. I didn't make any promise I did not fulfill.
The 25.9 billion naira Dr. Peter Odili Health Facility in Rivers State is said to be a major step by the Wike administration to fight cancer, which results in about 72,000 deaths annually, according to the Nigeria National Cancer Prevention and Control Plan 2018 to 2022.
Let's get more on this. Joining us to discuss it is the Commissioner for Health in Rivers State, Professor Prince Will Chike. Thank you so much for joining us today on Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
So the Cancer Center in Rivers State is one facility constructed by the Nyesom Wike administration and is, one of several in the country. We do not have that many. But how do you think these efforts by the governor in the face of the ongoing brain drain of medical personnel in the country, how do you think these efforts will make, our medical personnel stay back and work in the country?
Thank you. It will definitely go a long way in trying to reduce and slow down the issue of medical tourism and brain drain, because what you are going out for to manage outside, diagnosis and treatment of 2 of the most complex ailments, cancer and cardiovascular diseases, can now be diagnosed and managed in this part of the world with the best of equipment and with the best of personnel all over the world. We want to attract them. That is what we want to do.
Right. So now that the center is open to the public, how accessible do you think it will be to the average Nigerians?
First of all, if you understand the thinking of Governor Wike and his administration, he has the soft spot for those who are in need, the sick persons in particular. So it is open to every person, every human being. First, I am a medical doctor. I will not advise that any human being who has a cancer problem or cardiovascular problem should not be managed. Universality of man. So, and that is the thinking of my governor and his administration. So it is open to every human being, not just Rivers Indigenous or Nigerian, or West African sub-region, African, whoever, as far as we get the specialists from within the country, within the sub-region, and from outside the continent to help us run this place effectively to save lives as much as possible.
And so the governor says part of the motive for building this center is to ensure that, it's accessible to Nigerians so they do not have to travel abroad to get the care that they need. How affordable is it?
Definitely it will be affordable as much as possible. If you listen to during the commissioning, the Emir of Kano, Aminu Sanisu, did plead with the government that when the center takes off, that it should not be run to make gains, but rather to help the needy patients, because cancer and cardiovascular problems dig deep into the pockets of individuals and families. So definitely we have considered that too. It will definitely be subsidized. And of course, a huge amount of money is kept aside for the running of that particular place. As I speak to you, the necessary engagements have commenced with the foreign partners and so on.
Right. You do not have, these many facilities in the country. We have quite a few that are functioning. But to what extent do you think this initiative will address medical tourism of the traffic of cancer and the cardiovascular patients to other countries?
Yes. I've had a patient who had cancer. And diagnosis is one of them first. Before you diagnose, depending on the staging of the cancer, if you diagnose early and you stage properly, management is easier, either by chemotherapy, which you have, or by radiotherapy, or even brachytherapy. So that is what has been provided there. And like I tell myself and most of our colleagues who are still within Nigeria made me. So I can't run away and leave those who are supposed to help you as a medical doctor. And I know so many people, if the equipments are there and the staffs are well remunerated, they will definitely stay. The issue of running outside the country, they are only going there because the facilities within Nigeria are not there. Now we have them. We have the latest equipment of MRIs, CT, mammography, brachytherapy, radiotherapy. We have the best of the nuclear medicine facility provided. So there is no need to run out to manage cancers. That is what we see. So the issue of medical tourism and brain drain will definitely be eased out, because we are also open our hands to welcome other medical practitioners from other states and other parts of this West African sub-region as much as possible. We have already drawn our plan to get them in to run the place together with the foreign partners.
Right, Professor Princewell Chike, thank you so much for your time today on Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. After the break, feeling water pressure in Zimbabwe's capital region with a swelling population, a failing infrastructure, and political infighting, the burden of finding clean water often falls to women. Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent Makori in Washington. In Zimbabwe's capital region, a swelling population is taxing the water supply. That supply is further strained by a failing infrastructure, vulnerable to contamination, and by political infighting that blocks improvements. The burden of finding clean water often falls to women, as Keith Baptiste reports from Harare.
Marjorie Sande manages this public borehole in Mbare, a poor and crowded suburb of Zimbabwe's capital city, Harare. These kinds of sites shorten the distance to clean water, a blessing in a metropolitan area cursed with access problems for years.
A lot of people actually prefer to use bush pumps as opposed to the tap water from the city council.
Poor neighborhoods bear the brunt of water shortages, as residents often turn to public water points for free or low-cost access. Harare's Mayor Jacob Mafume says the local reservoir, built in the 1950s, isn't big enough to serve the community.
It was designed for a population of 500,000 people, and the greater Harare population has got 3 million people. So demand is outstripped supply.
President Emerson Mnangagwa introduced a borehole plan in early 2022 to improve water access in Zimbabwe. The plan builds on long-running efforts by local and international aid groups to provide public water sites. UNICEF set up the bush pump that Sande manages. But the women who come here say they are being harassed and sometimes physically attacked. Some men jump the water line. Others, so-called borehole marshals, illegally take charge of water points and demand obedience, cash, or sexual favors in exchange for water access. A rape clinic official at Pariranyatwa Hospital in Harare says there have been many reports of people being harassed or assaulted while fetching water.
So this sexual assault that takes place is a complex of a lot of things. So it can be as subtle as, if you want water, then you need to give me some form of sexual services.
Many victims do not come forward due to shame, fear, stigma, or simply because they do not know what action to take, says Rutendo Mudavanu. She works with a female empowerment program, Shamwari ya Mwanasikana, which in Shona means friends of the girl child. To help, the NGO also has recruited male volunteers to aid at water points. For Keith Baptist in Harare, Zimbabwe, Carol Gunsberg, VOA News.
A new stance on Africa and climate actions is the focus at this year's United Nations Climate Conference at the seaside resort of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Discussions on delicate issues on whether rich nations should compensate poorer developing countries most vulnerable to climate change was part of the formal agenda. For more than a decade, wealthy countries had rejected official decisions on what is referred to as loss and damage. Our correspondent, Ayola Kasim, tells us more.
This COP must be a moment of solidarity.
Since the world leaders sat in the climate summit in Glasgow last year, a war has started in Ukraine, and every corner of the world has witnessed alarming climate disasters. More so, 2022 is on track to be one of the warmest years on record. So as they gather here in the sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, the questions many are asking are, why are we not going further and why are we not moving faster?
The simple political will that is necessary not just to come here and make promises, but to deliver on them and to make a definable difference in the lives of the people who we have a responsibility to serve, seems still not to be capable of being produced. I ask us how many more and how much more must happen.
Earlier, while welcoming the leaders, the Egyptian president urged them to become the models that will give the world hope, telling them climate change will never stop without their interventions.
Can we all work together? Do we have any other choice but to bring concrete action together? And so we must respond to the expectations of people across the world, people who are suffering more than ever the consequences of natural catastrophes. The intensity and frequency have never been so severe.
While acknowledging that there is a need to urgently end the war in Ukraine, the United Nations Secretary General reminded the leaders that with the climate crisis, we are getting dangerously close to the point of no return.
And the clock is ticking. We are in the fight of our lives, and we are losing. The war in Ukraine, other conflicts, have caused so much bloodshed and violence and had dramatic impacts all over the world. But climate change is on a different timeline and a different scale. It is a defining issue of our age. It is the central challenge of our century. It is unacceptable, outrageous, and self-defeating to put it on the back burner.
On the sideline of the summit in Egypt, the Minister of Environment and leader of the Nigerian delegation says the country will be pushing for a positive funding action from developed countries.
We have to be sure that when we live here, we have strong, dependable, bankable commitment from these partners.
Accessing the 100 billion a year promise from developed countries to help developing nations deal with the consequences of global warming is particularly important now, following a year of wild weather disruptions that have killed many in Nigeria, Africa, and around the world. Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
Kenya's museums and partners are conserving and promoting indigenous seeds after the government lifted a ban on genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, for farming. The museums say the native seeds are at risk because of the GMO seeds, which the government and some farmers say will help them to produce more crops faster as the region suffers a historic drought. Victoria Munga reports from Nairobi, Kenya.
Organizers say this inaugural Indigenous Seed and Food Culture Fair was set up to promote homegrown seeds amid growing popularization of genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, for products like maize.
Maize is a staple food in Kenya. And in Kenya we have traditional maize. What you've seen, yellow, indigo, all sorts of colors, black sometimes, blue. You still find it in traditional communities.
On October 3rd, the Kenyan government lifted a 10-year ban on GMO. The state hopes to improve crop yields and food security in the wake of a drought that has threatened food security. But indigenous crops advocates say the move risks the extinction of native seeds in the future as a result of seed types mixing.
When you look at the smallholder farmer in Kenya, they grow in small pieces of land. And especially if you look at maize, there's cross-pollination that happens. Our farmers cannot afford to leave a buffer zone around their farm to avoid cross-pollination.
Consequently, authorities are now encouraging farmers to conserve native seeds. Samuel Nderitu is among at least 200 farmers in the initiative. Nderitu is safeguarding over 500 varieties of native seeds on his farm. He believes that the quality of food supersedes the quantity that the GMO foods present.
Food security is just, you have food, you don't know where it's coming from, you don't know how it has been grown. But when you talk of food sovereignty, it's a right for me to grow my quality food, what I want to grow. I save my own seeds, not being told this is the seed that you are going to grow.
A section of farmers say they are willing to abandon indigenous seeds for GMOs because they believe GMOs mature faster and will produce a bigger crop even with small land size.
If GMO is going to improve our produce as intended, as a farmer I support it because we want a good harvest and a good time.
In its declaration this month, Kenya's National Bureau of Standards approved production of genetically modified maize, cassava, potato, and cotton. At least 7 other countries in Africa have approved commercial production of GMO crops, including South Africa, Ethiopia, Malawi, and Nigeria. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
3 generations of an Egyptian family is cleaning up the Nile, an environmentally friendly initiative. The grandfather is a fisherman who helps collect plastic from the Nile. His niece makes recycled bags, and the grandson rows the boat and compresses collected plastic waste. Interestingly, the family is coached and supported by a local non-governmental organization called Very Nile. Take a listen.
Mohammed Nasser goes fishing every day at 5 a.m., leaving the Kusaya village where he lives in the heart of Egypt's Nile River. After selling the fish he captures, the 59-year-old fisherman goes back to his boat, where he collects garbage thrown into the Nile, which he calls home and the source of his livelihood. He gives the waste he collects to the headquarters of the Very Nile Initiative, to which he sells the garbage for 14 Egyptian pounds per kilo, a much-needed source of additional income to feed his family of 5.
The effort to clean the Nile made me more comfortable. It opened for me a source of living. If fishing does not bring profit and I don't work enough, I collect some plastic bottles, which help support the children and the household. Even if I get nothing in return, I'll still clean the Nile because it is my livelihood. Any waste that I find, I collect in the boat. I have many large bags here. I collect buckets, shoes, bag, anything. When we all do it, the space is clean with no trash.
In 2020, the initiative launched the workshop to recycle plastic waste to support women residents of the Kasaya Island who otherwise could not find suitable job opportunities. Now Nasser, his niece Hayam Mohammed, and her son Yaya all work with the initiative to protect the environment while securing a decent living. While the grandfather cleans the Nile, the niece works at a workshop where women iron layers of discarded plastic bags that are later used in making bags and other products. Weekends are usually Nasser's best days for selling plastic, when those frequenting large boats and wedding halls on the Nile throw huge amounts of waste into the Nile. He could collect 70 kilograms of bottles daily over the weekend, as opposed to 20 kilograms daily during weekdays. Over the past 4 years, Very Nile has collected almost 180 tons of waste and employed nearly 65 fishermen.
There are only about 1,000 mountain gorillas left in the wild, and they live in only 3 countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda. To encourage tourists and locals to help protect the endangered gorillas, Rwanda has turned to social media platform Instagram with a project they call Gorillagram. Senator Todd reports from Kinigi, Rwanda.
At the Volcanoes National Park, the Susa gorilla family lie playfully as they welcome their tourist of the day. They are the biggest of the 23 gorilla families in Rwanda and the most popular among guests. Experts say these visits help improve the social life of gorillas and promote conservation. To help, Rwanda has created an Instagram-based platform called Gorillagram. It allows people to stay connected to their favorite gorilla families and monitor their daily activities. Through Gorillagram, tourists can also upload pictures and videos of gorilla families. Officials say the platform sorts the content for social media and provides real-time data for researchers.
By that simple action of adding that tag to their photos, what they're doing is making that photo accessible to the national park itself and the monitoring and research teams that will then see those photos coming in from every tourist every day in real time, see where the gorillas are, what they're doing, how they're behaving, see their health, what sort of condition they're in, if any is expecting a baby, they see the silverbacks, the big males fighting, changes of gorillas between groups, all of that information coming into them every day directly from those photos.
The International Union for Conservation of Nature classifies all gorilla species as critically endangered. Wildlife groups say there are about 1,000 mountain gorillas left in the wild, and officials say conservation efforts have helped improve their numbers. Over the past 15 years, Rwandan officials have named more than 350 baby gorillas in an annual ceremony known as the Kwitizina. This year, 20 new gorillas were named. During the annual event, people adopt baby gorillas and continue to monitor and support their growth. The Gorillagram is the new addition to the commitment to protecting and conserving the great apes through what experts call citizen science.
Well, more and more tourists are concerned about the climate. They're concerned about ethics in travel, trying to travel responsibly. They really want to feel if they travel to a destination that they've done something to actually actively give back to the destination.
At the social media launch, advocates raised concerns that the daily post could threaten the security of the gorillas by providing information to poachers, but the chief warden at the Volcanoes National Park says the gorillas are well protected.
There's no risk, no threat. Our groups are already protected. They are visited by trackers, by rangers every day. So this program, it's basically to strengthen our capacity to have pictures.
Rwanda's development board says they plan to use the same technology and social media plan to help other threatened species like rhinos. Sana Anutod for VOA News, Kininji, Rwanda.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. To remember, channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joka Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.